I'm here with Scott Harrison, the CEO of Charity Water and the author of the powerful and inspiring book, Thirst. So happy to be here with you, sir.
Thanks, Dan. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, so tell me, I'm so curious about when was the time in your life where you found your purpose? What was that first step you took when you found it?
Yeah, I read about this in the book. I was a nightclub I was kind of a degenerate, really. I spent 10 years running around New York City nightclubs, trying to become the best, the king of nightlife, really. Worked at 40 different clubs, serious drinking problem, smoking problem, drug problem, gambling, pornography. I mean, you name it. I'd picked up every vice that you might imagine would come with a decade in nightlife. And had this turning point at age 28, and I just realized there would never be enough. I mean, I was the most hedonistic, selfish, emotionally, morally bankrupt person that I knew, and I needed to make a radical change. And I asked myself this question: what would the opposite of my life look like? And the only idea I had was, well, what if I volunteered on a humanitarian mission for 1 year, almost as a penance for the 10 years that I'd wasted? And that led me on an extreme journey to Liberia, West Africa. This was a country that had just come out of a 14-year civil war. There was no electricity, no running water, no sewage, no mail system. And it was really there that I saw people suffering in extreme poverty for the first time, and so many of them because they were drinking bad water. And I saw a girl drink disgusting water from a swamp for my first time in my life. And it was just in such sharp contrast to my former life. I used to sell Voss water for $10 in nightclubs. People wouldn't want to open the water. They're drinking champagne or booze instead. So I wound up spending the better part of 2 years on this mission and came back just with this deep responsibility to do something about what I'd seen. It wasn't okay that kids were drinking dirty water. It wasn't okay that women were walking 5 hours to some disgusting swamp or river when we knew how to help them. So I really came back just with a very clear mission to try to bring clean water to every single human being on Earth. And at the time, there were 1 billion people that didn't have water.
And how did you get all of these people on board with that vision that you had?
Well, I guess the nightclub promoter skills were transferable. I mean, the same skills of maybe energetic storytelling that could get 1,000 people to turn up and queue outside a velvet rope turned out to be useful when I was trying to build a movement of generosity and compassion and empathy and inviting people to join this cause of bringing clean water to the world. So we were throwing events and parties and huge photo exhibitions, just trying to use radical creativity to get people to think differently about an issue that really, it's not in our face. I mean, Flint's been talked about a little bit lately, but America officially has 100% water coverage. And this isn't something that we see maybe like homelessness or cancer or even education, which is around us. I mean, this affects other people far away. So I tried to take all of the things that I learned promoting these very fancy and exciting parties all around the world and say, could I put those skills into the leadership of a humanitarian organization to raise awareness, to raise money, and to hopefully help millions and millions of people get clean water.
A lot of people have ideas, but few actually execute on them. Like, how do you actually take the idea and start to manifest that and then perform the first actions that push you in the right direction?
Yeah. I mean, I write about this in the book really to hopefully encourage other people who might have that idea and say, oh, I'm not qualified, or how would I start? I mean, I was $30,000 in debt when I started Charity Water. I was living on a closet floor, walk-in closet floor in Soho because I had no place to live. But I was armed with this powerful experience. I had the photos that I'd taken. I had the stories that I could tell that were true, the people that I'd walked with that were suffering, that needed help. And I just remember working 80 to 100 hours a week in those early years, just telling the story. I would go out, I'd meet a guy like you, I'd open up a laptop, and I would click next through 50 photos, and I'd say, Dan, do you want to join us? And 9 out of 10 people in the beginning said no, because it wasn't real. Join what? Join you, some dude like living on a closet floor? But then one would say yes. And then I'd get a little bit of encouragement and maybe a little bit of funding. Maybe you'd give $100 or $1,000, and then I went on to the next. So it was just almost this flurry of activity, but the story was very clear. The vision and the mission was very clear. You're invited to this amazing movement, this cause that is growing of people that care about others, that look at the ills of the world and say, not on our watch, we can do something about clean water. And it just started to grow.
Yeah, you mentioned storytelling. What do you think of the attributes of an effective story?
Well, I'm all in on storytelling. I mean, I think I still see so many organizations today try to beat people over the head with data and statistics, and it just doesn't work. We ignore some of the data coming in. If we can't associate a story with the data, then we forget it. We dismiss it. So, for instance, if I told you now that 663 million people worldwide are living without clean water, it almost means nothing. It's just a big number. You've never seen 663 million people anywhere. Okay, it's the size of 2 Americas. Well, you can't even imagine how many people live in America. So, but if I told you about, a 13-year-old girl who was walking 8 hours for water one day, and at the end of her 8-hour walk, she slips and falls and she spills her water because she stumbled on a rock. And instead of going back to the water source, she hung herself from a tree because she was so distraught that she had broken this clay pot, which was a valuable asset of the family, and she had just wasted 8 hours, and she spilled the water. And the image of a 13-year-old girl with a noose around her neck swinging from a tree with fragments of clay pot next to her on the path maybe gets you just to connect a little differently with the water crisis. So I think we tell stories. Sorry, that was a downer story. I could also tell you a story about a woman who got clean water for the first time in her life in northern Uganda, and we asked her how her life was different. And so you have a well now that's clean water in your village next to your home. And she said, I used to walk this far distance. I would take these 2 jerry cans, these 2 yellow jerry cans, about 10 gallons of water every day. And she said, I never had enough water to provide for my family. I had a husband, I had kids. So she said, I would always put my family first, and I didn't use the water for myself. She said, I would use it for my husband, for his clothes. He would let him wash his body. I would make sure my kids were clean. I would wash their school uniforms. She said, I never used the water for myself. That's what Ugandan women do. We put our families first. So she said, now there's clean water in my village. She said, now I'm beautiful. She said, I have all the water that I need. I can wash my face and I can wash my body, and my clothes are clean. She said, I feel beautiful. She said, I'm looking so smart. And, I think the power of story, boy, there's so much there. Dignity for a woman, beauty. I mean, we don't think of water ever in those terms. I mean, water's just something most of us just take for granted every day. We take long showers, or we even buy bottled water that we don't need to. When we live here in New York City, we have great water, and we see people walking around with these $3 bottles of water. So I think the power of story brings people in. I think the stories need to be true. I think they should be compelling. They shouldn't be embellished. But there are stories everywhere. You can find stories out of failure. Charity Water has been known for telling stories to the public for when we screwed up, when things didn't go well, when we drilled wells and we failed and we didn't get any clean water, when our rigs crashed and drove off the road. Because I think those stories speak to the values that we're trying to convey. In the case of a story where one of our rigs crashed, it was because our local partners in Ethiopia, were trying to reach the most remote, marginalized areas. And there were dodgy roads, and they should not have gone on those roads, but they took a risk to reach the people at the end of the road, and they crashed the rig. So that story, even though it was terrible, it crashed an asset, it took months to fix, speaks to the drive, the passion, the integrity, the heart behind the local partners who want to leave no one behind. They are not drilling wells by the highway. They are not taking the easy path. They're willing to go to extremes to make sure people aren't suffering.
Yeah, and how have all these stories, your travels, the people you meet, those who have suffered, changed your outlook on life, and what differences has it made in your everyday life?
Yeah, well, I've been fortunate to see a lot of the world. I've been to 69 countries now. I've been to Ethiopia 31 times. So some of these places, where we work, I've got deep ties to the country, and I think it's different now. I've got 2 young kids at home now, and it's definitely a different lens. I mean, when I see children suffering, Before I saw children suffering, now I'm imagining my children suffering. When I see, there was a woman that I met once in Niger, in the Sahel Desert of West Africa, and she told me that 8 of her children died. 2 survived. And she named all of her children, and she told me the ages which they died. Now she was unsure of the cause of death. Now she's standing next to this horrible water hole. It's brown, it's viscous, it's teeming with parasites and with worms and bacteria. And so we know why some of those kids died, maybe why most of them died. But before I had kids, I almost wasn't able to process the loss of a child, right? That almost feels abstract. And, I can't imagine losing one of my children. I mean, the heartache, the grief. Imagine doing that 8 times. I mean, how she was even able to smile, to welcome us into her home, to cook for us. I mean, it just put things in a different perspective. So I think I'm always really now looking at the suffering often through the eyes of my children, and not wanting any child to suffer around the world needlessly. The crazy thing about the water crisis is we actually know how to solve it in its entirety. So there's not a single human being alive right now that we don't know how to help with clean water. There are plenty of diseases we do not have the cure for. There are vaccines that we are searching frantically in test tubes that might be able to help swaths of people. But water is not it's not a mystery. It's not unsolvable. There's not a single one of those 663 million people that if we had the resources, we couldn't say, we can help you right now. We can help you. Not a single village, not a single country. So I think that's what makes it both exciting to work on and to grow this movement, and to know that we can actually see a day when everybody has clean water if we fight hard enough and if we invite more people into this movement to join us.
What do you think prevents people from donating to charity, and how can you encourage them, especially people who are young, who are just starting off in their careers, to donate to charity?
Yeah. Well, charity water, again, I read a lot about this in the book. One of the formative ideas or realizations now 12 years ago was that Americans don't trust charities. Now I've traveled around the world, this is true, and the Brits, they trust charities even less than the Americans do. But 42% of Americans polled by USA Today said that they just flat out don't trust charities. And a more recent poll by NYU found that 70% of Americans believe charities waste their money. So that's shocking to people because, right, America has this heritage of generosity and philanthropy, and right, who's more generous than Americans? But yet almost half the people don't trust the system. They feel burned by charities. They feel that charities have been dishonest often. So we came up with this very powerful 100% model about 12 years ago, where we said, let's take the most common objection people have to why they're not giving, and let's just nullify it. Let's make it moot. Let's take it off the table. How much of your money will go? 100% without question forever. And we opened up, we took the typical charity model, which is all the money goes into one account. We separated it into 2 accounts, and we said, from a very small group of people, we're going to raise all of our overhead separately. My salary, the 90 people here at headquarters, even our office costs, the lighting bill, the phones, the insurance, the flights, all that's going to be raised separately, so that 100% of every donation from the public can go directly to build water projects that help people get clean water. We went so far as to say we'll even pay back credit card fees. So that's true to this day. If you went on right now and gave $100 on your Amex, unfortunately, I don't get $100. I get $97. But we would pay back that $3 fee, money we didn't even get from your donation, and we would send the $100 to the field and then track it. And that's really been the power of the model. And by the way, I don't preach the 100% model. It's not right for all organizations. It was right for us and the problem we were trying to solve. What I do believe in is just transparency. I think people are open to a lot of different value propositions. They just want to know where their money goes. If I told you right now my copy machine was broken and it was going to be $400 to fix it, you would write me a $400 check right now. You would want to meet that need if the copy machine served a purpose. Now that's the least sexy cost we could probably even think of. Like, who wants to fix a copy machine, right? It's an overhead cost. But you would know where your money's going. You would know that it was meeting that need. So that's what we really believe in, is just tell donors what you need, tell them what you're doing with their money, and then show them the impact. This sounds so simple, but it's not the common experience that most people have with charities. And so really the vision at Charity Water now for over a decade, if the mission is to provide every single person with clean drinking water, the vision is to reimagine the giving experience. It's to reinvent charity. Charity means love. It's a beautiful word. It means to help your neighbor in need and not get anything in return. And I think we need more charity in the world, not less. We need less people cynical about the act of charity, the act of radical giving and generosity and caring about others. So we've tried to attack that with a business model and then just methodology that says, when you give me a gift, I owe you something. I owe you the proof of what I did with that gift. So whether it looks like putting all of our water projects up on Google Earth and showing people satellite images of the wells as they're built, or now we've got thousands and thousands of wells online that are actually connected to the cloud, that are streaming the data so people know how much clean water is flowing. It's just all this, the general theme is tell people how their money has impacted the lives of others, create a virtuous cycle of impact, of a feedback loop, and they'll continue to give. You'll open up their hearts even more and they'll continue to be generous.
And what's your best piece of career advice?
Boy, I think you got to work really, really hard in your 20s. I see some people do the 2-year thing. They change jobs every 2 years. I mean, it takes you a year just to even understand the context or the company or the organization you're working in. The second year, you start getting good. And really, year 3, you start getting good. You start really mastering your craft. And, I just feel like people are doing themselves a disservice. I mean, I'm 12 years in. We were talking about public speaking. It took us like 5 to 8 years to develop any sort of proficiency in this, right? And now I'm pretty comfortable in front of 10,000 people for an hour. My hands used to get all clammy. I used to have to pee before I got on stage. It took a long time to get really good at that. And I think, I just had a kid sitting on this couch who just graduated college, and he was asking me the same question. I said, it's okay to work really, really hard. Don't worry about Netflix. Don't worry about Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad. You could take all of that time, the 50 hours you were about to sink into Netflix and chill, and go read books, go to the library, go explore, go build life experience. And if you work really, really hard, when you get to my age and you start having kids, or whatever age, you get to kind of scale back a little bit. I'm not working 80-hour weeks now. I've got 2 young kids at home. I want to cook breakfast every day, for my kids when I'm home. I want to pick them up from school. So I think that overwhelming grind, through the 20s and really in my case, through most of my 30s, has now allowed, a different cadence in life. And now I don't feel like I have to make these trade-offs of being a bad husband or a bad father because I'm just grinding it all the day, at the office. We've got an organization now. There's almost 100 people here, an amazing team. Everybody contributing. So, work hard and stay at one job for a while. Learn a skill.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Ken.
it.